You're listening to an archived CabralConcept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stevencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the CabralConcept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the show. Great to have you with me here today. Looking forward to getting into our Wellness and Weight Loss Wednesday show, where today we're going to be talking about the topic of the 3 ways that leaky gut leads to fatigue. So this is a big one for me. This is a big one I try to really talk a lot about in my practice and to my health coaching team and to our integrative health practitioners, and here's why. That so many people suffer from fatigue and inflammation-based issues, but they never relate it back to their gut. So if we don't relate it back to the gut, now it could be other things, so I'm going to explain that today, but many cases go back to the gut. So if we never know that the level of our fatigue or inflammation, which can cause fatigue, stems from gut-based issues, meaning digestive-based issues, then we never know how to fix it. Then we simply do what I was taught originally back in the day to do for energy, right? So when you have low energy and you go on an adrenal-based protocol, they give you DHEA and they give you licorice root. I understand the methodology and I understand the thought process behind it. However, what I thought was failed to be addressed that I later learned was that giving the adrenals licorice root that stimulates them, or at least allows for a longer half-life of cortisol, and DHEA, which is going to then allow more of the hormone to be shifted towards cortisol, yes, it will give the adrenals a little bit of a wake-up call, okay? I'm not saying that. We have a product called Adrenal Energy Support, and it gives you not just the licorice root, but it gives you all the other factors as well to give the body more energy. So it's not that I don't believe in that. I believe in it. However, I only use that for, let's say, a period of 12 to 16 weeks or so, or during stressful times, while I'm addressing the underlying root causes. So again, supplements are fantastic. I use them all the time. There's a lot of practitioners out there that you think right now that they're helping people through whole food alone. And I think you would be shocked to know the level of nutritional supplements they use. And the reason is, when you look at it, licorice root, eleuthero, or you're looking at your B vitamins, any of these things, we're basically just condensing food or the extracts of herbs and food into capsules, because people's digestive system gets so weak that even if you give them the greatest foods in the world, like I was doing as I was trying to get well, I could not absorb them. So we have a catch-22. We want to heal the body. It needs more nutrition, but our digestive system's so weak that we can't break it down. And that is the first way that leaky gut leads to fatigue. So I'm going to come back to that in 1 second. But what is leaky gut? For the people out there who are saying, what's leaky gut? It sounds horrible. Well, it is kind of horrible, but here's how it works. You chew food up in your mouth. It mixes with a little bit of salivary amylase, which is just an enzyme that helps break down certain types of starch. That food moves down our esophagus into our stomach. In our stomach, it should be a nice low pH, at least when there's a protein-based meal there. And it wants to be able to break down that food over the period of anywhere from an hour, if it's a protein-based meal, to 3 hours or so. And then it moves into this first part of the small intestine. I'm not going to go through all the different processes today. We've actually gone through the different processes. And even just last week on our stomach bloating show, done many of those. But last week's, it was, let's see if I can find that right here. The 10 foods that block bloating and GI issues, the H. pylori protocol. That was on episode 1104. So what I want to talk about today, though, is what happens after that food makes its way into the intestines. Well, the intestines are connected to the stomach, and they move through the entire body. They're basically located below the rib cage. It's where your belly is. It's below the belly. You have about 21 to 23 feet of small intestine, and you have about 5 to 6 feet of colon, also called the large intestine. And that colon then leads to the outside of the body, which would be the anus. And that is where you're going to have a bowel movement, right? So here's the thing. That's about 27 feet or so of intestine. When we look at 21 to 23 feet, 5 to 6 feet or so, we're like 27, 28 feet. Well, what happens during that time it's in your intestines, which for a healthy individual will be somewhere between 12 and 24 hours. All the food is broken down. It's broken down by enzymes. It's broken down by good bacteria. All sorts of things are happening. And again, we've gone over this before. But what leaky gut is that the spaces between those intestinal cells, there's a small space. That space should be there. And what happens is because of alcohol overuse, too long, right? Chronic-based use. We look at it in terms of antibiotics. Birth control, we're looking at tap water that contains chlorine and fluoride. Artificial sweeteners such as Splenda or sucralose. Chronic stress, poor food combining, food poisoning. Any one of those things can basically create an inhospitable environment that leads to inflammation in the gut. And the inflammation in the gut can lead to an increased intestinal permeability. That means instead of there being what's called tight junctions that only allows those proteins to be broken down into small amino acid chains or individual amino acids, that's what can move through. That's what your bloodstream is ready to receive. Now, on the other side of that intestinal wall is lymphatic tissue, called your gut-associated lymphatic tissue, also known as the GALT. Many different types of GALT. We don't have to get into that today. You have all of your immune cells located there as well, specifically IgA, IgM, IgG cells, which will be brought into the blood as well. We have IgE sensitivities. And then we have the blood, which is going to transport that to the rest of your body, all the foods that we can use. Many of these will be brought to the liver first, and the liver will start to break them down, right? So we talk about a congested liver if your body has to break down more stuff that's spilling through the intestinal wall. Well, the intestinal wall can, again, become more permeable. And how does that happen? It's simply a widening of the gaps that are already there. A lot of people think that the walls have been kind of poked holes with. Well, there's theories on that the hyphae from Candida, which is basically like the roots of the legs, can actually poke through the intestinal wall. That may or may not come to fruition, but we certainly know that yeast and Candida can increase intestinal permeability. It can increase inflammation because the immune cells are going after the Candida or the bacterial overgrowth or parasites. We'll get to that in a moment. But either way, the inflammation can widen those gaps as well. There's an attack on what's inside of the intestines. Other things I'd like to mention as well with the intestinal permeability is that fats that are not broken down to smaller fatty acids and carbohydrates, which are not broken down into simple sugars, can make their way out. Now, the immune system knows that anything is not broken down to its smaller substrate is then deemed not fit for human consumption, not for your cells. So it will begin to attack that, especially since many of these proteins in particular are made from animal-based products or things that we know that are not human-based. Now, again, I'm not saying not to eat animal-based products. That's not what today's show is about. I've already done shows on that. And again, like, I'm never one saying like, hey, you can't do that. What I'm looking at today, though, is that if your body would see larger amino acid strands, let's call that a smaller piece of chicken, right? It's going to be broken down, but a smaller piece. It will go after that as a non-human entity, and that will cause an immune-based reaction. I'm going to get to that again in just one moment. So what we have is inflammation in both the inside and outside of the intestines, and this is leading to those larger gaps. It's not the only thing, but that is a big part of it. The other thing with antibiotics or the chlorine in tap water is that when we consume those things, we begin to wipe out a lot of our good bacteria. As we wipe out a lot of that good bacteria, as you'll see in a moment, we begin to not absorb as well. And it can also allow for the overgrowth of more negative forms of bacteria, such as E. coli, which is in our gut, but it becomes overgrown after antibiotic use. Same with Candida. One of the reasons why this happens, and almost no one's talking about it, but they should be, is that when we use antibiotics, they are antibacterial, but they're not antifungal. So if you take an antibiotic and you don't, and your doctor, your MD, PCP, does not give you a nystatin or diflucan, which are pharmaceuticals, again, I don't use those in my practice, you're not going to wipe out the yeast or candida. But again, that's not the end of the process. Then you need the repopulation. So the whole system's a mess. And to be honest, it's being used as a temporary approach. We even give people antibiotics for SIBO that they often get from taking antibiotics in the first place. They take the antibiotics, they feel good. This is what I see in my practice from people that come to see us. They feel good for about another 6 to 8 weeks after using the antibiotics. And then guess what? Well, we have the proliferation again of that bacteria. And the reason is it was not repopulated in the specific way that it should be. So that's a big part of leaky gut. And the gut hasn't been sealed up. So that's what we want to talk about today. We could spend hours, and I've spent hours doing actually, webinars and presentations on the gut and how these things break down. I'll certainly be doing more in the future. But what I want to talk about today is that if you do have increased gut permeability, and we'll give you ways to check this out in a moment, is that, and I'll go over the first way first, is that when we have the intestinal-based permeability, and we have proteins seeping out into the bloodstream or even the lymphatic system and going to liver, we are asking our immune system to begin to rev up. When it revs up, we're not even talking about autoimmunity today and leaky gut. We'll talk about that in the future. I talk about that in my book, The Rain Barrel Effect, how more than 90% of all autoimmune-based issues and diseases diagnosed go back to intestinal permeability. Why would that be? Well, think about it. We have foreign bodies, foreign entities, moving through the gut wall, which is supposed to be the outside of the body. It's a tube that runs from our mouth all the way to our anus. So it's an outside tube. And only the good stuff that our body's supposed to see should move through the tube. Well, if the tube does have holes in it, if it has perforations, or in this case, just looser junctions, it allows then some of the foreign bodies to escape and move into our bloodstream. Well, the nice thing is we have this immune system, which is active and ready. It's ready to go after these foreign bodies. Well, over time, we get chronic immune-based inflammation, immune-based stress, and the body begins, I don't believe it ever really starts to mess up, but over time of seeing all of these foreign bodies and having those move to different parts of our bodies, we start to get some type of autoimmune, which is basically self-induced breakdown. So we go after the nervous system, the myelin sheath, we go after the thyroid and Hashimoto's, MS is the myelin sheath, and we go after the joints and rheumatoid arthritis. There are many, many more, right? So many autoimmune-based diseases. We come up with a new one every year at least. So that's the thing. But the issue is that only the disease name only tells us the aftermath. It tells us symptoms. This autoimmune attacks the joints. This autoimmune attacks the thyroid. This autoimmune attacks the nervous system. This autoimmune attacks the pancreas. But what we're really talking about is what caused the autoimmune-based reaction. And so now we know, not just through naturopathy, but we know through conventional medicine that there are gut issues. And when we fix the gut issues, we get a cessation of symptoms, which means we get a cessation of the disease itself. So when people say, do you do this, do you work on this? Do you treat this disease? No, I don't treat. I don't cure, nor do I diagnose anything. That's for the realm of conventional medicine. What we do is we look at all of the underlying root causes, with intestinal permeability, aka leaky gut, being one of the largest. Stress is another big one. Usually they come hand in hand because stress can cause intestinal permeability as well. But what we need to do is say, what's causing the immune system to be so fired up? And I'll do a whole show on autoimmunity and intestinal permeability another day. What I'd like to talk about today is think about this. Your immune system is supposed to come in waves. So we have a low-level immune activation every day. Every day we eat, there's slight exaggerations of an IgG, meaning like there's slight low-level immune-based activation. That's normal. That should happen. Low-level histamine, that should happen. All of that's natural and normal. We want that. We want our immune system to be killing cancer cells that we don't even know are in our body. That's a great thing. But we get a larger activation and a more chronic response, which means daily for more than 6 weeks, whenever we do get this gut-based permeability. So now we're at this heightened response. And that's why so many people are feeling so great right now by skipping the majority of the meals in their day or only eating in a small window. Well, one of the reasons is they have leaky gut. And they're no longer putting healthy foods in their body that can then escape through the gut wall, right? Yes, that's one of the big reasons. And they say I have so much more energy. I understand that. I totally get it. But wouldn't you rather be able to eat food and have energy and not get bloated and all of those things? That's what I look for. And then I always say to people, if you choose to fast, then do it because you're choosing to, not because you have to. If you choose to do a carnivore diet for experimentation, do it because you choose to, not because you have all of the bloating, the joint pain, the autoimmune. You're choosing to do these things rather than forcing your body to do it, because those aren't healing processes. The healing process would be, why is it that when you eat, you get tired? Why is it that when you eat, you start to gain a lot of weight? Why is it that when you eat, you have no energy, right? Besides the bloating, you have no energy. So what we're looking at is this. Chronic immune-based activation zaps your body of energy. So when people talk about I'm inflamed, yes, you are inflamed, and we could work on the inflammation, and we will. But at the same time, I want to be looking at root cause diseases here in the body. So the second one is this. The second way I want to talk about this is that, and I alluded to this previously, when our body is in a weakened state of digestion, meaning we're too stressed, so we don't produce enough stomach acid. We're too stressed, so we don't produce enough bile. The bile does not drop down to meet that acid-based food mixture coming into the duodenum, which is the first part of that small intestine. That's so much of your digestion. Yes, you might have 27 feet of digestive tract, but so much of it's taking place in the first 10 inches to 1 foot. We're getting right there. You're meeting the liver is dropping down bile. The pancreas is giving enzymes over. The stomach has already produced its HCl and its pepsin. All of that's already happening. And you get this mixture where acid meets alkaline and it's ripping apart the food. It's emulsifying fats. It's really doing all this amazing job. It's killing parasites there because of and bacteria if it hasn't already happened in your stomach. Because bile is very toxic to all of this bacteria. It allows it to really clarify the intestines. So this is why we need everything. The body is a set of systems that work together. Just because you shut off the stomach with proton pump inhibitors or H2 blockers or any of these things doesn't mean you're helping the body. Like, what did you do for the liver? What about the pancreas? What about the bacteria in the intestines? What about the villi? You didn't help any of those things by shutting down the stomach acid. You actually made things worse, right? So we need to look back to what are the causes, because what happens now, especially those people who are on acid blockers or they just have weak digestion because of stress or H. pylori or any number of issues, is that the food starts to just sit there and ferment and it begins to break down slower. Oftentimes, because of the inflammation in the gut, we have blunted villi. Villi are just basically microscopic finger-like structures that if we were to flatten out your intestines, look down at your stomach right now, just for a second if you're in the car. Small, right? It looks overall small. But if you were to flatten out your intestines and you were to flatten out all the villi, it would cover an entire tennis court. That's how much surface area there is. Well, when your body's inflamed, when you took 3,000 capsules of amoxicillin like I did, you end up having destroyed villi. Why is that important? Well, it's because those villi contain the enterocytes. And the enterocytes help to break down all of the food, and they help to manufacture and absorb a lot of your vitamins and minerals, as well as in the production of your happy, feel-good neurotransmitters. So when we look at that and we say, wow, this goes a lot deeper, because if I can't absorb my food properly or even break it down well enough, I can't manufacture those B vitamins, which are needed for energy and to help de-stress the body. That's pretty important. Or what if I have mood issues? Well, what if my bacteria is imbalanced and that's causing the mood-based issues or the anxiety? Or what if I can't produce enough serotonin? Sure, I need to get it to my brain, but it needs to start in the gut. And if these things do not happen, then we start to see the genetic manifestations in which we're encoded, but not before that, right? So if you take care of it, whatever you're genetically predisposed to does not have to manifest itself. I see way too many protocols being given out right now based on genetics of what could happen rather than what is or what precipitated. You don't take 20 different nutritional supplements based on your genetics because of what could happen. You don't do that. Your genetics tell you they're an inside look into what is possible for you in the future. And then you make sure through lab work that those things have not manifested. And if they didn't, you don't use specialty 50 different types of supplements in order to keep them at bay. You can use a baseline, a foundational protocol. I'm good with that, but you don't need 50. Your goal is to keep the systems functioning properly. All right, the last way, the third way that leaky gut affects the overall energy systems of the body is that your body must produce and use even more energy the weaker your digestion. So the first part we had was inflammation and immune activation. That takes energy. Think about how tired you are when you have a virus, you have a cold, you need extra sleep. You need extra sleep to repair your body. Think about how tired you are if you have allergies, if you're someone with allergies. You're just tired. You're exhausted because you have a massive inflammatory response, which is an immune response. By the way, inflammation is produced also by the immune system. So that is one of the reasons you're so tired. We know that can happen with leaky gut. The second is that you are not breaking down and absorbing your nutrients well enough. So your body sometimes feels hungry all the time because you're not breaking these things down properly enough. And the third is that because of the blunted villi, because of the stress, because of the inflammation, maybe the poor peristaltic movement, constipation or a loose stool, that you are being drained of your energy and resources due to a sluggish digestive system. So that your body, which typically, again, you're using about 30% of your energy during the day for digestion. Now, we can start to understand and look at why we have so much energy, more energy when we don't eat. But remember, that is temporary. That's temporary. You're spiking the machine. You're pushing yourself with less food. The problem is it's going to start to then become more catabolic. So what I mean by that is eventually your body will start to have less and less reserves. You never feel poorly typically when you start a more catabolic-based program. And the reason is that your body has built-in reserves. It will find a way. But what happens is that you need to keep up and pace with demand. So my goal for you is this. Make it easier on your digestive system to break down these foods. But truly, what really matters, what we talked about today. If you have a history of antibiotics or birth control or alcohol or fried foods or drinking tap water or food dyes, I don't have a whole list in front of me right now that I'm thinking on the spot. All of these things can begin to weaken the gut and break down your body's ability to properly digest, absorb, and keep the gut wall sealed. So what we do is this. We begin to start with an elimination diet. And again, all of these shows are available. They're all free. Head on back to StephenCabral.com/podcast. Check out all the previous shows. Check it out on leaky gut. Check it out on candida overgrowth, on parasites, on H. pylori. Anything you want for a topic, we have it there at StephenCabral.com/podcast. And there's a search box right there. Now, if you have a specific question, our health coaches can answer it right at CabralSupportGroup.com. They could probably find a previous podcast as well. My goal for you would be to go back, listen to previous podcasts, get the information that you need so you know where to start. What we do with people with a real, this true energy-based issues, we need to look at, yes, overall stress, but today we're talking about gut-based issues. We will run an organic acids test. We will run a stool test. We will run a food sensitivity test in that order. So if they can only afford one lab, we'll do the organic acids test. 2, we'll do the stool test. And then 3, we'll do a food sensitivity. Would I love people to run the big 5 plus the stool test? Of course I would. But not everybody can afford those, so we get it. And then based on those lab results, we'll start to heal up the gut. We'll remove the parasites if there's parasites. Same with the H. pylori. Then after that, we'll remove the candida and bacterial overgrowth. And then after that, we'll seal the gut wall. It's not as complicated as it sounds. But remember, this goes way beyond simply just giving someone probiotics and assuming it will fix the issue. Remember, it's just like I spoke about earlier. It goes way beyond, fixing the adrenals goes way beyond giving somebody licorice root and DHEA. And I'm not referring to any practitioner in general, by the way. I don't know the practitioner. I'm not stating anyone. So if anyone's saying, oh, that's what this person teaches, I'm not talking about that person because there's no one in general I'm talking about. But when I was studying functional medicine over 10 years ago, that was what was being taught. So remember that this goes way beyond the issue because this is a systems-based issue. And it also goes way beyond a low-carb diet, a keto or carnivore diet, or a low FODMAP diet even, for fixing a candida, bacterial overgrowth, or other issues. Because the goal is not to starve them out, because it's not going to happen. They will outlive you, trust me. Candida will outlive you. That's its job. That's part of how it works, okay? So the system will always survive, and you will always survive. You'll break down your bones. You'll break down whatever your body needs for minerals and everything else, right? It'll break down organ tissue. We know this. So the goal is not survival, because your body will do that on its own. You're not going to, believe me, these are chronic-based issues. People with autoimmune live decades with autoimmune. Let's not try to piecemeal this. Let's look at it at a systems-based level and understand that the body will always survive, but at a cost to you and your energy. My goal is always this. If we can test, we'll test first. You can test with your local practitioner, or you can order any of these tests to do right at home at equilibriumnutrition.com. Totally up to you, however you want to do it. If you can't retest, then we want to get right in the rebalance stage. We want to work on sealing up that gut wall. So we'll do the candida and bacterial overgrowth protocol, followed up by the CBO finisher, which seals up that gut wall. And we'll start to revive the entire body. That is it at a foundational base level. I know that I just gave you the simplistic 30,000 foot view there, but I want you to understand that fatigue goes well beyond just, I need a little bit of caffeine in the morning. As your body starts to become depleted, as your gut starts to break down and get more damage to an even greater level, that is when we need to take care of it the most. We cannot let this keep going on. In our practice, one of the big things that we specialize in is the gut, even when someone come in for gut-based issues, because we know now it's implicated 90+% of all immune inflammation-based issues. So hopefully today's podcast was helpful. If it was, please do feel free to share it with anyone else you believe it could serve. Take care, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. Before you go, I wanted to ask you this question. What if I could teach you in just a couple of hours how to transform your thyroid, hormones, adrenal, cholesterol, blood pressure, blood sugar, weight loss, energy, mood, brain, pregnancy, anti-aging, or many other health-related issues? After 20 years in private practice, after seeing and overseeing 250,000 client appointments, I sincerely feel I have the real-world data and have found the answer you've been searching for. So what I've done is spent hundreds of hours of my own time refining what you need to know in order to uncover your underlying root cause health issues and then begin to rebalance the body and bring it back to a state of robust health and wellness. I'm going to teach you exactly what I do in my private practice so you can understand how you got here and now what you need to do in order to heal. You'll receive all of the important success checklists, protocols, and even ways to customize it to make the program fit your busy life. And you'll get all of this at a fraction of the price. Let me save you the time, money, energy, stress, and frustration of not knowing what to do next. Instead of reading dozens of books on the topic and seeing multiple practitioners, I will condense everything that you need to know in just a few hours of video tutorials that you can watch and listen to anywhere. Together, we will make this healing process an enjoyable one that you can take with you for the rest of your life. I wish you all of the best of health and happiness, and I hope to be able to guide you on your healing journey through my Health Results Accelerators. Simply choose the health imbalance you're currently suffering from, and by the end of today, you'll know what went wrong and how to get well again. I guarantee it. For details, head over now to stevencabral.com/courses.